Good morning, everyone. Welcome to SEVA VentRounds. We're going to do June 9th, 2026, and we're going to use other waveforms. And the topic is using end-tidal CO2, esophageal, and airway to recognize the interactions. There is no endorsement of any mode, ventilator, or manufacturer. Whatever we say, it's our opinion, and it does not represent the Cleveland Clinic. There are my disclosures, and Rob is not with us today because he is serving for jury duty. So you got me here, but there's several of us to have a great discussion. All right. Please keep your microphones muted, but you can unmute them if you have a question, or you can use the comment section of the chat to answer or to put any questions that you want us to discuss. Again, you can unmute yourself, just unmute intermittently to ask the question. There's CME for the CCF team, and there are CRCEs for our RT team. And for RTs, just remember to complete the evaluation, and then you get these things. So I wanted to start with this image, which I find very useful for my thought process of how signals occur. And what you have here is the electrical activity of the diaphragm, and this dashed line that says number 1 is pointing an increase in the activity, the electrical activity. And this is simplified. One of the things that occurred, or the technological advancements of NAVA, is that they created a simplified electromyogram of the electrical activity of the crew of the diaphragm. And so it looks, this is the profile that is cleaned by the software, but when it starts going up, it means that the electrical activity, so the signal from the brain is starting to hit. And then you'll see the dashed line number 2. Dashed line number 2 is when the pressure starts dropping, which signals that the esophageal, the pleural pressure is coming down. And that tells us that the diaphragms are contracting. And you'll see that there's a little bit of a lag between what the diaphragm starts receiving, or the signal starts increasing, and then the pressure starts dropping. And then finally, the dashed line number 3 highlights the eventual activation of the airway pressure when it starts going up. And so you can see that from the electrical activity, the signal going out, to the pressure in the pleural dropping, to the airway, there's always some lag, which is expected. Here it's a little bit exaggerated so you can see it, but you can imagine that it can be even closer than that. And then the end of the breath, that's an interesting one, because you'll see that the electrical activity of the diaphragm, and in this case, it's a little bit different. So number 5 points the peak activity, and then it starts decreasing the peak activity of the electrical activity of the diaphragm. And then the point where it reaches the maximum drop in pressure is pointed by 4. So you can see that there's some uncoupling there of the two signals, which can happen. But usually it would be 4 after 5 here. That's what you would expect to see. But then that's the end of the breath, and then it starts relaxing. The muscles start relaxing. And then finally on number 6 here is the end of the actual mechanical breath. So in terms of cycling, you can see that there is always some delay also that occurs, and it can be less or more depending on the mode or what cycles the breath and whatnot. But it's important because many of us used to believe that the end of the breath was actually down here, but this is just the pressure returning to baseline. The tonic activity of the muscle, they have relaxed, and as the muscles relax, the pressure returns to baseline. So important observation of these 3. All right, that's a key SEVA knowledge. And so for that, I give you with love this graph. And I'll just orient you towards what you're seeing. You have the airway pressure in orange or yellowish kind of hue. In pinkish, you have the esophageal pressure. And down here, you have the esophageal, this over here, they're overlaid, and over here, it's isolated. Then you have the transpulmonary pressure, and transpulmonary pressure in this ventilator, they put it as a pressure of the lung, but in standardized terminology, we use PTP, so the pressure, the transpulmonary pressure, and which is the airway pressure minus the pleural pressure, or in this case, the surrogate is the esophageal pressure, so this one minus this one. Then you have the flow, and at the bottom you have a volumetric CO2, but for graphical items, even though it's volumetric, the waveform serves us the same way as an end-tidal CO2, so it's similar. So I have oriented you to what you see here, and we'll start by a simple question, which would be, what is is this volume or pressure, PC or BC? If you want to give it a try, what do you think this is, pressure or volume for this breath over here, where I'm putting the number 1 up there in the top? And remember, have no fear, learning environment, release the beast. All right. A good amount of people saw this as pressure. So great job. So in all general terms, this is definitely pressure control. So you're correct. Anybody wants to share why you thought this was pressure? What gave it up for you? So the flow waveform is a good item. So yeah, very good. So in general terms, if this was flow and it was a descending ramp, it could be, but it's there's some irregularity on the shape. That would be one. The pressure is really square, meaning that the airway pressure is being controlled during this breath, and it would be what I would expect. And if there was PMOS present, I would expect some deformation of this pressure waveform, meaning it would be moving downwards rather than staying there. So excellent observation. Now, with the information I'm giving you here, it's hard for you to come to terms if this is a mandatory breath. I mean, it's definitely triggered by the ventilator, but we don't know what's cycling it. It could be time or it could be flow. And this doesn't, with one single breath, it would be hard and we would spend a large amount of time trying to come to terms with it. But in general, I know, and I'll show you another waveform, that this is CSVS. So with one single waveform, it would be difficult to ascertain from this particular example. In others, you can, but in this one, it would be hard to know if I set the I time very nicely or if this is cycling by flow, which is by flow. All righty. So what would you say is the load on this patient? Elastic, resistive, or PMOS during inspiration, and elastic, resistive, or PMOS during expiration. All right, starting to see some coming in. Very good. Very good. So let's start by the obvious, which is the elastic during expiration. So you see the flow return to baseline. Now, it's a little bit challenging here because I did not give you time. So meaning there's no marker for time, and that makes it harder to determine, but you can see that it returns to baseline in a relatively short amount of time compared to the inspiratory time. So I think that I would definitely agree that the load is elastic during expiration, based on this waveform returning to complete baseline, although I don't have markers of time. And then during inspiration, many of you talked about PMOS. And we're going to take a little bit more closer look at this in a second. But it returns back to baseline relatively fast. It doesn't look like a passive breath. So what I would expect if it's fully, I mean, the classic finding that I would expect to see is an exponential decay. And instead of that, I see this a little bit more straightened. So I agree with you. I would say that it's PMOS with plus minus elastic load. So great job. That's how I would read this. And obviously you have here the presence of PMOS, but we're going to talk a little bit more. Yes, Leora, that's correct. When we can't see the time scale, how do we tell how clinically? You can't. It's hard. It's hard. So that's why I shared that it was a little bit tricky without a time scale to tell particularly how fast it was returning. But just looking at the inspiratory time, that's why I would say it seems like this is elastic. It's returning to baseline relatively fast. But yeah, you're correct. All right. So what PV discordance do you see in terms of trigger? Anybody write what you see? All right, I see one answer, two answers. Keep coming, have no fear. Very good. Keep it coming. Anybody else? Okay. All right, so I have, there you go. So there's a couple of people. So the everybody recognize that there's a late trigger. So the breath starts right here, and you can see the amount of time that it takes for actually the mechanical breath to be delivered. So there is absolutely no question that this is a late trigger. And you can see that there's different markers to see that here. So you have your esophageal pressure that starts dropping right here, and then the breath essentially triggers all the way until the end until the breath essentially has finished, is when boom, it triggers the change in triggering the breath. You can see the flow going up above baseline. The scale is not very useful here, and this will happen, which you cannot necessarily see. But if I had been a nice person, I would have grabbed this cursor and I would have dragged it. This line that you see right here, green line, this is a digital screen, so I could have grabbed it and dragged it all the way to this point, and you would see that the flow would be positive. So it's above the baseline, and there's a feature I can zoom it, and you can see how it goes above the baseline at that period of time. That tells you that the patient is doing a breath, and since we are down here, you can also see that the end-tidal CO2 dropped. And actually it stayed dropped until the next breath, until the breath got triggered, but the patient was doing effort, and you see the effort reflected on the end-tidal CO2. So I hope that helps you see. So you usually don't get all these signals at the same time. Remember, during exhalation, you're controlling the pressure. So it's rare now to see these drops unless you have done something. And I'm going to ask you what you see there. And then you have here the esophageal pressure, the flow signal, and the end-tidal CO2 all showing the exact same thing. Very good. So now that we have seen that, there's some of you that also recognized that there was a failed trigger. A couple of you recognized this breath over here, that also had a drop in pressure, but it didn't trigger a breath. There's no mechanical breath that occurred there. And so the patient did the effort and returned to baseline, and then another one, and in this one it did trigger. So the question for you is, what trigger does this patient have? What type of trigger it has? Is it flow? Is it pressure? Or is it time? Okay, I'm starting to see some answers come in. Yeah, that's a great observation, my Samin. So in general terms, for this to be, if this was a flow trigger, the pressure would not have dropped. So that's an important thing for you to be an item. The pressure would have stayed the same, the flow would have increased, and then that would have triggered. The pressure dropping tells me that this could be a pressure trigger. That's what the ventilator would allow. So it would restrict somewhat the flow when it starts seeing the effort until you reach the threshold, and then it would trigger. And then Samin points out that there is no change in color on the line. And you would expect to see a change in color on the line when it's triggered by the patient. You would expect it on the pressure if it's a pressure trigger, or on the flow on this ventilator, which I don't see over here. And that would be the only thing. So I suspect, and actually that this was a time trigger breath, or that we were doing an end expiratory hold, and that's what did that. And I cannot recall for $100 what we were doing, and perhaps Amin can remember, but I think that we were doing an end expiratory hold, and that's why we saw this change over here in the pressure, and then we released, and the patient got the breath after that, a time trigger breath. Samin, I don't know if you remember, but I think that that's what occurred in this case. So I thought that I would just point out that this could also happen, that this is a patient that is in a time, you put a rate, and the patient is doing effort and triggers here because you have a very high threshold for triggering. It was not triggered according to this. But absolutely, it's a failed trigger, and there's a late trigger based on these two tracings. So I'm going to leave that at that. As you probably know, we don't classify inspiration and cycle and expiration under these circumstances because you have to fix what's causing this. But I do think that there's a learning point here in terms of what you're seeing on the waveform. And I'm going to erase the drawings that I have done here, just to highlight something, which is the transpulmonary pressure. And so I wonder if somebody wants to remember what's the equation for the transpulmonary pressure. Have no fear. So what's the equation? There you go, Megan. Very good. The airway minus the pleural pressure. So that's the equation. Now we use the esophageal pressure as a surrogate. We use the esophageal pressure as a surrogate. And so it's airway pressure minus esophageal pressure. All right. So if you think about this, as the pressure is becoming negative right here, as the pressure is becoming negative, so now you're gonna put a value that it's negative. So let's say that it went down to -5 to say something, and the esophageal pressure also went to -5, right? So -5 minus -5 equals 0. So that's why the pressure, the transpulmonary pressure during this period in which there is effort, but the esophageal pressure is going down and there's no change in flow, it becomes negative here because it becomes flat. It becomes a 0. And then when the ventilator pressurizes, you can see the delta between these two. The airway pressure is higher than the esophageal pressure, and that's why you see the pressure rise at this period of time. So this is important. The patient is doing effort, but with no change, and so the transpulmonary pressure remains the same, the pressure across the structure. Now, the team is asking, why is the pressure never actually negative, the esophageal pressure? So the esophageal pressure may be negative in terms of generating a lot of negative pressure as you are inhaling. So you're inhaling and you're dropping the pressure below and making it more negative. And so that would be the value there. Now, I thought that it would be interesting to show you this one because this is a classic image that you need to recognize. And I want you to forget right now about what is on this side. So just focus on this breath right here. Right here. So it's the same image, but now you have here the esophageal pressure. You have the airway pressure overlaid on top of the other. And here's the transpulmonary pressure. Again, forget about this graph over here because something else was happening there. So forget about this. Just this one. What do you think is happening there? So observe the pressures are the same. The pressure rises, and it comes down. Good, Samin. Keep it in. Transpulmonary pressure is essentially flat here. You can see the flow does change. So there's a flow change and the patient does exhale. But why are these two curves matching? So usually there's a difference between the airway pressure and the pleural pressure. There has to be a difference because of the structure that it's there. Yeah, so I don't know who RJ is, but you're correct. The esophageal. Oh, Rotendo, good job. If the airway pressure mimics the esophageal pressure mimics the airway pressure, i.e., they have the same pressures, which you can see right there, the same end expiratory pressure, the same airway pressure, the same profile. That is a patient that has the balloon went into the wrong way. So good job, Rutendo. You're absolutely right. It went into the airway. So when you're looking at the balloon and you're advancing it, and it goes into the airway, you're gonna see an equalization of the pressures. If you're in volume control, you're gonna lose the resistive step up, that little initial step up that occurs. But if you're in pressure control, they will look like it does look here, almost identical. So great job, Rutendo, for catching that out. And then you can see that we detected that, so we start pulling the balloon out, and then we got it out of the esophagus. So this is as we're pushing the balloon, and it's getting squeezed by the balloon from the ET tube. So that's why that goes up. So good job. All righty. So I hope that this was useful for you to recognize a couple of items. One, the esophageal pressure waveform. When does it start? When does the breath end? Review the transpulmonary pressure equation and recognize a balloon inside the airway, which you prompt, hopefully, to remove that device from the wrong place and put it in the right place. So again, the transpulmonary pressure equation is the airway pressure minus the pleural pressure, all right? And that will give you the values. Now, what we do for these measurements, and actually this is the pressure at the airway opening. This is important, or Rob will come after me if I put this inappropriately. So it's the airway opening minus the pleural pressure. And here, instead of using the pleural pressure, we use the esophageal pressure as a surrogate. And then a thing that commonly makes an error is to think that this is the transalveolar airway pressure, which is the alveolar pressure minus the pleural pressure. Do remember that these two become equal, approximate, if there's static conditions. That's why we do the pauses to see those two. So take-home messages: read more waveforms with esophageal pressure. Look at your end-tidal CO2, at your flow, and your pressure waveforms. All of them have key information for you to see. Here is the CME for CCF caregivers, the CRC for the RTs. I'll leave it there for a second so that you can scan it with your phone. If you have not subscribed, sign up for the SEVA Summit. I just have to tell you, the SEVA Summit is about, or if not filled by today. And so more dates will be coming for April. So sign up for them. And we're exploring opening to another venue, so we may be able to hold more people soon for the SEVA Summit in September, perhaps. And congratulations, Rutendo. Send us your images. We love images to read and learn together. If you detect an error that we mentioned here, send us an email telling us how to correct it. Thank you very much. See you soon.